Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're doing the spring cleaning inspired Steam fall list cleanup. So basically every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I look at new games that come out for Steam, and if they look interesting enough I put them on the fall list to give them a little time to get some reviews usually, and then we'll see if they're still getting reviewed highly enough to put them on the wish list. Sometimes I skip some games straight to the wish list, but that really has nothing else to do with anything. Also, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday while I'm streaming Hearthstone and talking about video game news, I'm also looking at games that come out on Steam, so that's when that happens. Today we're going to be doing probably part 1 of games starting with the letter T, but as far as I can imagine, the splitting point here will be at the end of games that start THE space, which is also weird because some games that are labeled on the fall list, since the list is alphabetical, were doing the Dewey Decimal System thing and putting the word T kind of as a comma at the end of the title, but then most games aren't. So the whole system seems to have been changed at some point, and it just seems to have no consistency. So we'll be looking at games on Steam. I have a ton of Chrome tabs taking up a ton of RAM right now, and we'll be looking for red flags. Also, if we have to look at any adult games, I have a blurring function, so we'll have to use that to make sure the screenshots are not family friendly, or are family friendly for YouTube. The first game we'll use as an example here is Taekwondo. I'm not sure if that's really how you spell Taekwondo, but I'll just assume it is. Grand Prix. It is mostly positive at 78% positive of 23 verified purchase reviews. That's what this number means. There could be people who are activated by a key or got the game for free, but those reviews are not counted up here. This came out October 9th, 2018. We're going to be looking at games that either came out before January 1st, 2019, or have over an arbitrary number of 20 verified reviews. Thus, it has some relevancy because at least 20 people bought the game and reviewed it. You'll be surprised how many games don't have 20 reviews after 6 months or longer. Even, I think I've seen as long as 4 years some games not having any reviews. We'll be looking for other red flags. Multiplayer as a tag here might be a red flag for me. We'll be also looking to see if a game just has a special attraction to me. This looks very pretty as far as a game. I would half think it's a VR game, but then I guess it can't be because I'm seeing 2 characters. It's like a really pretty looking Taekwondo style game. I don't know if Taekwondo would really succeed too well as a series. I guess mixed martial arts is popular, so you could probably sell a AAA mixed martial arts game, so I don't see a reason why you couldn't specialize and have your own Taekwondo series. Although compared to other fighting games, there almost certainly are fighting games where certain characters have Taekwondo style versus other styles, which probably makes a lot more sense. I like this developer's name, Hello There Games. A lot of developers have some terrible names for their company, in my opinion. $9.99 doesn't look too bad. There is a bundle here of everything this developer's made for $20 for 4 games, which really is not a bad deal at all. This does say single player and online multiplayer and shared split screen, which is kind of the 3 things you would need in a fighting game. It's English. Sometimes we'll see some red flags where a game is online only, then frankly I can't really criticize it as a game critic because your online experiences, it has a good chance to be completely different than anyone else's. Or if we see a game on a rare occasion that supports English and Russian only, or English and Chinese only, often I've seen a lot of bad games that have those specific language targeted. Or sometimes we'll run into an achievement game that has like 100 achievements for 99 cents, or one achievement, because Steam will highlight if you get 100% of all achievements in a game. So if there's only one, that's really easy. The problem with fighting games inherently is they need to have a good feel in the fight mechanic to get a player base to play them, and you need a player base, otherwise your fight game won't really succeed. And this might be an example of a game that I could probably spotlight and show off, but it might not really have a story mode or defeat a bunch of AI partners. You also are definitely not seeing a lot of variety in the outfits or these models, because they're in full safety gear, as if this was a real world fight. That's something you would almost certainly want to jump away from in a fighting game, is put them in regular outfits. That's the beauty of fiction, is it can be a lot less safe or safety conscious, or completely safety conscious. If we're still considering a game, we'll come over here to the negative reviews. I find positive reviews almost 100% useless, and pull up the negative reviews and see what are being complained about. If I was to guess what the complaints will be, this is going to take a while because I'm out of RAM. I have 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I've used it all up on Chrome browsers. It's going to be multiplayer focused and have very few enemies. Multiplayer focused and not many online, as you would expect. This review, by the way, was activated by a Steam key, so this negative review wouldn't be counted up at the top. This was October 10th, 2018 also. So they're saying nobody was online nearly 8 months ago as of this recording. Offline you can't rank up, so he doesn't know if you can get any more moves than what you start off with. Let's see, for the most part you only have one punch used as a block breaker. Block up and down, left stick up and down while holding the shoulder buttons. Karate Champ 2018, this is not. So he's suggesting in that review to look up a game called Karate Champ instead. Yeah, I would not be surprised if there is really no audience here, and if the single player is really minimal, which it seems like it is. Read all the instructions here, or descriptions here. I'm not really seeing anything really mentioning what you can do. It says motion capture movements from professional players, which should probably say professional fighters, capturing the motion of the fighters. It says beautiful environments, and then it has 4 arenas. That's pretty low. Officially endorsed by World Taekwondo. I have no idea if that is a big Taekwondo organization or a really small one. Yeah, it's a shame. This is pretty, but I don't think there's a single player experience here to try, and so I can't really cover it, and I don't think anybody can try it. And I see nothing coming up on Steam called Karate Champion, so either that's a game that's a console only game, or it's just not on Steam. Yeah, okay, well, this game is our first game, and even though it mostly seemed positive at the start, picking it to pieces, which is what we'll be doing for all these games, although we'll try to do it in a fast way. I think I've found the reasons why this would not be a good game to play, amongst a rather long list of reasons that you might want to, a long list of other fighting games you might want to try. Street Fighter, Blaze Blue. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm not sure what the ones are that are actually good. A lot of the AAA fighting games are too expensive. Meanwhile, there's a team management game and a simulating game with MMA in the name. So the only other one here is MMA Arena, which is a card-based fighting game. Interesting. So even when I search MMA, there's nothing coming up that matches. It's going straight to Fire Pro Wrestling, which is probably the best wrestling game to play, and it looks like a 80s or 90s game. Meanwhile, if you're going to play like a WWE game, like WWE 2K19 for instance, you get mixed results on that because nobody has bothered to make a good WWE game in a long time. And every single screenshot here looks like this is just real footage of real wrestlers and not actual footage of the game. So maybe the graphics look really good, but clearly the gameplay mechanic doesn't look very good. Okay, so that is animated. It looks pretty, sure, but so you're in this weird quagmire if you are interested in karate, taekwondo, any martial arts. Karate. Yeah, there's kind of nothing coming up when you search just the phrase karate. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you're lost. You're totally lost as far as what games are even on available. And Steam's recommendation engine is garbage because they're telling you they're suggesting Lethal Leg Blaze, which is a fighting game, that it has a very unique baseball one-hit kills you gameplay style, although Blaze may have changed the gameplay style a little bit. Lethal League was a one-hit kills you. Nidhogg, which is a fencing fighting game. None of these match. Rocket League is not a fighting game. Grid 2 is not a fighting game. So you can't even get recommended through Steam a good Taekwondo game. So let's move on. That's getting removed from the list. This will be how most of the pages start, and I'll just reload them and use more RAM to get the images to load. Yeah, shame. Spent too much time on that game, but it really is a shame. If there is a certain type of game you're looking for, it can be incredibly hard to find a good version of that type of game on PC and on Steam, and that's why I started to make a wish list. Now I use it as a way to ask people to support my channel by gifting me games off the wish list, so I have more games to cover, or more of a variety to pick from when I have to decide what to cover. Next game to consider here is Takanaria, and it's just getting a simple sentence here saying it's a very simple game created with pixel art. It came out January 14th, 2019. Take note, it's 88% positive with 153 user reviews. It hasn't been out 6 months, but it is over that arbitrary 20. I guess the idea here is if you're honest about your product, people will be happy enough with it. This is also a free game, so if you're putting out a free game, that's easy enough to play. Now, I really don't have a reason to play a free game, though, because the whole point of being a video game critic is to give consumer advice, and a consumer doesn't really need advice to get something for free, unless it's a free-to-play game with in-app purchases, and it would say that here. This is also tagged Chinese above Japanese, which makes me suspect it's a simplistic Chinese game. We could look at the negative reviews. I guess it really doesn't matter. In an effort to save time, I should probably just say, okay, you have a game here. In the end, this game and video and these screenshots aren't really showing any dialogue or gameplay mechanic. It seems like you're just kind of wandering around, yeah, I'm not really seeing anything at all, which makes me feel like it is a low effort Chinese game. It's bare bones. A lot of effort was put into sound design and the graphics are very nice. However, the game itself is the very definition of a walking simulator. All you do is find all the ghost things and eat some plants. The lore never stretches past the island. Used to have people living on it, which is a shame because there are some really creative ideas here. This just not given the chance to shine. This review is anyone found an ending. It's a beautiful Pixar game, but nothing else. And by the way, all of these reviews are activated by a key, which this is a way that low effort game developers have found to manipulate Steam. Is they used to at least be allowed to basically print out keys and then sell them on third-party stores, and then if they get bad reviews because the game is bad, it doesn't matter because it won't affect their already standing good reviews. And that's almost certainly the case here. By the way, if it says positive, very positive, overwhelmingly positive, that has more to do with the number of reviews than the percentage of which are positive. You could have 1,000 positive and 75% were positive, but you had 1,000 reviews and it might get labeled as overwhelmingly positive. Whereas if it was 75% positive and you only had 10 reviews, it would just say positive, which is a ridiculous system. Quite frankly, it makes no sense and really confuses the issue. That being said, time to move on to the next game. This is getting removed from the follow list. Most of these games will get removed from the follow list, which is great because it also means in 6 months to a year when I need to do another follow list cleanup because there will be some new games to consider, that list, the follow list, won't be anywhere as big. As we're looking at games that will probably take 2 or 3 hours to get halfway through games starting with the letter T. I imagine there's some this is going to be quite an effort. So next game we're considering here is Take That, which looks like it is a little low polygon, a little asset flippy as far as a Western shooter. That being said, there aren't a lot of Western shooting games out there. This is early access and it came out December 24th, 2018. Now that's a problem to me because for what you're seeing here, yes, I guess you call this early access, but you had 6 months to have a you had 6 months to expand this. Even in the description, they're trying to sell it as a good thing that you can play the core content in less than 10 minutes. That's not a good thing. $2.99. It seems like this developer, and we don't run into too many of these developers, but some of them try to engage the public and just constantly have feature creep and add things. If you look at these updates, they're talking about new upcoming update and realistic version. There's no reason to make a realistic version when you haven't finished the first game. You need to make your first game, then make a second one. And then the next update 9 days later on May 10th, automatic rifle vote for game development decision. So he's now asking people to tell him what components they want in the game. Here he's saying the game is about 40% complete, but you're paying for the whole game, which is a promise, basically. There's several other Western games that are attempted to be made. I guess Western 1849 here probably is on my wish list or follow list, and it is more positive and clearly by the screenshots more of a game. Sometimes there are some games on the follow list that I just need to use, or I was trying to use as anchors to point to a style of game that I would like to play, not particularly the exact game I'd like to play. This gun game that came out in 2006 was like a AAA game, so it would have a lot of relevancy. It's very positive with 753 reviews. Yeah, but as far as Take That, it has been in early access too long, and I'm really not willing to give games a year of early access, because the way I see it, AAA developers and publishers, people who really know the business of selling video games, only really care about the first 6 months of initial sales. They don't care if a game gets a bunch more sales 8 months in after the release. That's outside the launch window. You can also see this when a lot of the Epic Store exclusives have 6 months launch window exclusivity periods, or when a console exclusive comes out and then 6 months around 6 months later it's no longer exclusive and comes to PC or the other consoles. So if the launch window is roughly 6 months, well, then the launch window is 6 months, and if you've spent your entire launch window in early access, you're probably never finishing the game. I've seen a lot of games that have been in early access for years, and they're just abandoned. They're just being put on Steam to sucker a few people into buying them, and there's no chance at all that they get finished. Take That's not making it to the follow list. That being said, here you have something with a lot more elements. It's pretty much the exact same game, just done better. This came out February 10th, 2017, which actually would be a year before this. So, a lack of market research for Take That. Like, it's kind of silly to even try to compete with games that already exist and have a pretty decent fan base. Although this is not even a game that really has a decent fan base. This is only 45 reviews, and it's $4.99. Meanwhile, if you want to go back to the Activision AAA publisher, here you've got Gun, which looks a lot closer to something like Red Dead Redemption than just an arcade style game. And I guess Red Dead Redemption would be your real consideration here. Let's see, is there a Red Dead game on Steam? No, there isn't. None of them ever came to Steam, and so that might be why there's a little bit of a lack of consideration there. But clearly, both of these games are selling something slightly different. A Western 1849 Reloaded and Gun. So, both of those I'm going to consider adding to the wish list. Next game we have to consider is Talk to Strangers, which is 95% positive with 24 reviews. This came out April 19th, 2019, so it hasn't been out 6 months. It's a game where you're working as a door-to-door salesman, which is not really a job that exists, at least in the United States, anymore. And you're going to different places and trying to talk to strangers, basically selling them things. I think it's more of a comedy life simulator that goes in a different direction than just actually simulating doing a job, and that's probably why it's been positively received, because if it really was just a door-to-door salesman simulator, it would kind of suck. It feels like it's taking the general idea of Papers, Please and going a different direction with it. This is still getting updated with builds. This is English and Portuguese Brazil. That's an odd combination of languages, but it doesn't really raise any red flags. Let's look at the negative reviews, but I think this might be good enough. Like, we have one English negative review here. Decided to try it, seeing some reviews praising the odd and surreal quality of the folks and all the products in the game. Unfortunately, the trial and error nature was not only selling products, but discovering traits about your in-game self were so unenjoyable that I wasn't really motivated to dig any deeper and discover the truth about it. How long did they play? Half an hour. When you begin the game, you'll find yourself going from home to home selling products. Some residents are not home at certain times, some are cranky at certain times, some prefer a hard sale and vice versa. Some seem to make your character irrationally angry or depressed, etc. However, there's no way to know any of this beforehand, and you can only take advantage of this knowledge on subsequent playthroughs. Well, that's pretty much true with real life too. I think I would absolutely improve the game if residents were to have some tells about when they're home, in the mood to buy, and what type of approach they prefer. Yeah, that's certainly true. Also, and I could imagine you just being given a guidebook at the beginning. That would be pretty helpful. Now, I told this to load the 2 negative reviews, and I'm so low on RAM, it didn't even do that correctly. But yeah. How expensive is this game? $3.99. I think it's worth a try. Of course, putting this on the wish list doesn't mean I'll immediately buy it or anything. There's at least 1,000 games on the wish list to compare this to, and this really is a case where it would have to be on sale for at least half off, so at least $2 or less, and I probably would only get it if as a filler item more than as a game that I'm specifically trying to play. And I, of course, also need to make some decisions about how many games do I really need to buy next Steam sale, and what kind of games am I going to be looking for. I've swung back and forth. Sometimes I've wanted to get a bunch of short, simplistic games where I'll do just one spotlight video on them, or sometimes I'll want to collect more AAA games where I spend 60 hours or more playing the entire game. Next game we have to consider is Talk to Yuno. Chat with Yuno, solve cases, input keywords, and simply to check how she's doing. This looks kind of like a anime visual novel. Definitely has an anime style to it, but I think there's some other elements to this. This almost feels like this is a cell phone game that has been ported over with the black lines on the side in the portrait mode. It seems like you can type in key phrases. So the question here, is this game relevant? Not really. It has only 5 reviews and it came out October 26th. So then it becomes, is this some kind of sort of text-based adventure game where you actually can find a single player story through it and have an actual game? That's the question. Let's see. You help Yuno solve cases. The reason why Yuno summoned you, because I guess you're playing as the ghost, is because she wants to ask for advice. Keyword preview. Unexpected visitors. Play a little bit every day. Some cases develop over time. You and Yuno might think you have solved someone's problem, but then things take an unexpected road. No need to worry about saving player's name in progress or saved automatically. Well, that sounds disconcerting because certainly I can't commit to playing a game every day and just coming back and playing it some more. And is this potentially a game where you would have to go in circles here? And then there's a whole second game, Talk to Saki, who seems to not be summoning a ghost through a crystal ball, and yet you talk to her. And talk to Aya, who again doesn't seem to be summoning a ghost. There are some VR games that have come out where you just kind of hang out with anime characters and just live with them and pretend like they're your real girlfriend. I guess is the general idea, or like you can actually interact with them. This feels kind of like a prototypical version of that. Huh. A literally tiny visual novel about a girl who is passionate about the cult. She needs your help. She needs to help her friends, and so you decide to summon you. You can input keywords to know more about the occult and ask her how she's doing. After inputting suggested keywords, you can ask to solve cases. Have fun. Alright. See, the chat feature is a bit of an overstatement, and the game is sadly not funny. Dialogue manages to beat into the ground the fact that likes the occult, but I finished the game not really being able to describe her or with any attachment to her. We actually physically meet another character but never see them again. This game was honestly not that interesting. Can't recommend unless you're interested in an easy 100%, and I guess that's 100% achievements. Is this an achievement game? Well, 13 achievements is a reasonable amount for $3. Yeah, I don't think this works as an idea. Meanwhile, if this game, this Spice and Wolf VR game, is one of the more recent VR just hang around and deal with an anime character as if they're your friend style games. I think if you're looking for digital companionship, this would probably suit you a little bit better, although Nita really is going to do very well. And if I'm looking for a visual novel, Talk to You fails as a visual novel too. And then there's a question, why is this video widescreen but then every screenshot portrait? It's a shame. I think if there was more money behind this kind of idea, a word parsing text adventure, there might be something there. But inherently, if you just want to do a kind of murder mystery horror visual novel, there's a bunch of those that are very well written and way better animated than what this would be. So this needs to leave. It just doesn't stand up to comparison, and some of these games are hard to compare to other games, certainly, and that's why they're on the fall list, just because I didn't have enough time or energy to consider them previously, but now I really need to do the hard work and consider things. So what is this? It's called Tamashi, an ancient entity seeking help, a witch, an unnamed soul in a twisted temple. This looks crazier than even The Binding of Isaac, a dark tale in the inner discovery of a distorted and perverted world. This is 96% positive. This feels like it's tagged nudity too. So actually I should be going fuzzy over here and just looking at the screenshots to see if anything offensive is going to be shown. I don't think there is. Says it's a horror puzzle game. So is this kind of a... Yeah, I guess... I would have thought it was a platformer, but... maybe it is just more of a point-and-click adventure. Let's look at the reviews. This is the kind of game that's so weird, you kind of want to think about... I think about covering it, but I could really only cover it during my Halloween month, in which I cover the hardest, the scariest of the scary games. And there's kind of a plethora of games that tried to sell themselves on scary, objectionable, potentially objectionable material. Agony is a great example of this, although Agony also did some weird bait and switch, and there's Agony and then Agony unrated that is just barely less censored than Agony was. So yeah, it's hard. It's a hard choice. The only negative review we have here is the not in English. It might bother you a lot if you're religious or militantly anti-superstition. Spooky game with interesting visuals. Decent puzzle platformer. That's really what I'm trying to see here, is what is the actual game part of this. And I shouldn't have taken off the language filter. That would have been easier. Well, this probably is not a game that would play too well without some censorship on YouTube, but I think Tamashii gets to the wish list. It's cheap, it's well received, it's already at 32 positive reviews. The counterculture of the occult and things like this does have that heavy metal kind of appeal. Now, I would almost say for certain the Binding of Isaac is by far a much larger game series. Rebirth, I believe, is the newest version. Overwhelmingly positive at 63,000 reviews. Binding of Isaac also kind of goes with more of a cartoony perspective, so it's not as grotesque as Tamashii is in the first place. Yeah, that definitely falls under the category of unique, and that's what I'm looking for, is unique games, different kinds of games to cover. Unfortunately, if you want to go the other direction and find something that is actually heavily in a religious element, like truly a religious game made by a religious group of people trying to be something like that, there really isn't any games developers like that. There are some that make terrible games and then put religious, usually Christian iconography in them, and then try to sell them as if they're something special or good games, but that's kind of it. So that's probably in part because most religions, in at least a small part, are competing for the time and attention of people who play video games, and thus they take kind of an immediate negative attitude. Although seeing a game like what we just looked at certainly gives a lot of fuel to that fire. Next game we have is Tango the Adventure Game. This is a point-and-click adventure game. It's 84% positive with 19 verified purchase reviews. Came out November 16th, 2018. It's technically not hitting the 20 arbitrary number, but it's close enough, and this game looks good enough. So unless there's something about this where it's a part of a game and kind of like episode 1, which we've run into that before, if this is a complete game, this is good enough to go to the wish list. See what the 3 negative reviews are. At a glance, the game looked like something I'd enjoy immediately, but after actually playing and finishing, I'm deeply disappointed. Noticeable loading times, little amount of puzzles or any content. Game is about an hour long to get 100% completion. The text doesn't fit the screen. I can't read half the dialogue box. That's probably a settings issue. English and Spanish Spain, English and Spanish Latin America is an odd combination of languages. $8.99 for an hour of a point-and-click adventure game, though, is asking kind of a lot. Let's look at the positive reviews in this case and see how long they played. An hour and 1.6 hours, 2.5 hours, 10.6 hours, let's say that's an outlier, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 1.6 hours, 0.7 hours, 9 hours, that's probably an outlier, 2 hours, 4 hours, probably an outlier. Yeah, this seems like a game that is only an hour and 2 long. At that price, that's asking too much. So this needs to leave the fall list. $9.99 as the base price means that I would consider potentially buying this at $4.99. And even if it got down to $2.99, which it probably wouldn't ever, because that's approaching 80 or 80%, 90% off. I've never seen anything above 96% off before it's just 100% off on Steam. I am a sucker for point-and-click adventure games. That being said, there's plenty of other point-and-click adventure games already on the wish list. This can leave the fall list. Next game we have to consider is Top Cat's Battle Arena, which looks like it is a card-based player versus player and player versus event game focusing on cats, which is not really the way you would want to go. If you have to, every character has to be a cat, you've painted yourself into a corner artistically and creatively. This is mixed reviewed at 61% with 26 reviews. It came out December 17, 2018. It has no player base. It's still early access. It's free to play. It is a collectible card game, so of course it has in-app purchases, but then you also have to have a third-party account and agree to a third-party end-user license agreement. It's really just got everything in this. I got thrown by, like, I love cats, I love cat versions of things. I do not like your transgender agenda with some of that. I have no idea what this has to do with anything. Ignoring that threw me for a whirl. Meanwhile, there are other games with cats in them on Steam, and probably already on my wish list even. This fails because of just its lack of a player base. Any collectible card game would have had to got way more people to play it and review it. It's free to play, so anybody could have reviewed it. So Top Cat's Battle Arena is leaving. In fact, in all honesty, most of the collectible card games on the follow list are leaving because none of them are close to Hearthstone, the game I play every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so they're not going to replace Hearthstone, even though Hearthstone is getting really, really old. Next game to consider is Tavern Gardens Banquet. This is a match 3 game, and generally speaking I wouldn't want to play a match 3 game, but if there's a bit of a spin here, I might consider something different here. This kind of does feel like there's a boss element or a battle element in your match 3, and I kind of like the art style. It's not bad. It's 70% positive with 24 user reviews. There's a game, Might and Magic, what is it called? Let's see if I can find it. Might and Magic is Clash of Heroes. That's what I'm thinking of. Might and Magic Clash of Heroes, where you match 3 and fight against an enemy team. This feels somewhat similar to that. 24 reviews is not a lot for something that came out November 29th, 2018. $5.99. English, Chinese, and Japanese. Single player only. 10 boss fights, 60 unique items. So pretty much 70 battles is all you get for $7. You're paying about 10 cents a battle. Meanwhile, you might consider playing something like Puzzle Quest instead, or Gems of War. Some of these match 3 games work pretty well. 10 Million and its sequel, You Must Build a Boat, are both games I covered and are pretty good. And frankly, I thought both of these games at $4.99 were actually really expensive. Maybe they weren't $4.99 when I bought them, but they definitely felt like you were paying a premium. Meanwhile, if you want to play an adult game, Honey Pop is a match 3 dating game. Let's look at these negative reviews. I'm a bit iffy on this one. An interesting concept and fun for a few battles, but then it becomes a grind of mammoth proportions, doing the same fight over and over to little progress. And these aren't quick battles. The bosses have huge HP pool and can take a substantial amount of time to bring down. The game is not that good. If it had those mechanics of puzzle quests, RPG, infinite variety of creatures and bosses, but it really lacks in terms of game design. While it's an interesting game, the amount of effort and little reward makes it not worth the time. Okay, well, Tavern Guardian's Banquet, not making it to the wish list. Next game we have on Steam is a game I was seeing some of the mainstream video game critics and websites covering, called Tavern Tycoon. This is 70% positive of 476 user reviews. I'm not sure I really want to play a simulation game at all, any of them. The idea of running and designing a tavern might have a little bit more appeal than running a city or running a zoo or running an amusement park, which is how this usually goes. And this does kind of have a decoration element to it. I think when I last looked at this was early access, so it's saying it's out of early access now. This really is a game that I think falls under the category of a game that I'd only cover for like 30 minutes, and $13 for 30 minutes of gameplay is asking quite a lot. I wouldn't be surprised why you see a major difference here between its lifetime reviews of being 70% positive, and then the last 30 days it's only 46% positive. I wouldn't be surprised if this is exactly a case of it came out of early access and people are unhappy at the level of content in the game once it came out of quote-unquote early access. Interesting game, but full of bugs. This is May 24th, which is not too long ago as of recording. A waste of time and money, very disappointed. Theme Hospital is getting compared to it. Theme Hospital is probably a way better choice as far as a game like this. It's okay, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. There's not much content and bugs are everywhere. No real tutorial. First 2 hours of the game were incredibly fun. However, once you access all the rooms and furniture, keeping folks happy quickly becomes overwhelmingly. By the 5th or 6th scenario, you find yourself scrambling for space and cash as you attempt to provide the necessary amenities for all the guests. That's a big word. Still needs a lot of work. Yep. So, like, I didn't even sort. Well, I did sort by negative reviews. There's 145 negative reviews to 364 positive reviews when you include ones activated by keys or gotten for free. That's a really high negative ratio too. So yeah, this can leave the follow list. It's really just kind of a game that was abandoned. I don't know where you could have really taken it though either. That was kind of the problem, is this probably could have gotten a little bit more polished, been a lot cheaper, and set expectations a lot lower. But there's really not much you could have done different if you're going to stay within the idea of being a tavern tycoon. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is Tempest of Heavens of Earth. Here's a game tagged Faith, and this is they labeled that as a Dojin game. Dojin means it's small sales basically in Japanese. It's kind of like a I'm only gonna sell a few copies of this, and I don't have a publisher behind it, or AAA publisher behind it. Some people mistranslate Dojin as like porn mags or porn mangas, and some of those are Dojin, or almost all of them are Dojin, but that's not what Dojin means. It's just a mistranslation as far as I understand it. Let's see. Rogue Celestial seeks out your own path to the heavens, an ecstatic stylish 2D action game controlling this character, Tenshi Hinawi, as she runs around the realms of Gensokyo, your path of righteousness itself, a derivative game inspired by the Toho Project universe. There are several Toho games, but I don't know if this game is actually part of that. Derivative and inspired by it means some different things, and here's a game called Toho Luna Nights that looks completely different. Toho games, I think, are kind of like shooter games more than anything. This is from DL Site, who's kind of a publisher known for not publishing a lot of things. And while this is labeled Faith, it's faith of either a fictional religion or it's faith from Shintoism and Buddhism, and not even Japanese seem to understand the differences there very much, or take it too seriously. So it's not something recognizable by me. Let's look at the 12 negative reviews here, because this game kind of is all over the place visually, so it's hard to tell what kind of game it is or how good it is. It probably is on the follow list because I was considering covering some of the other Toho games, but I don't even know if it is actually a Toho game. Yeah, most of the Toho games I've seen look to me to be bullet hell style games. All the negative reviews apparently are not in English, and certainly other languages might have problems with the gameplay, but I can't really read those other languages. So let's see what we can figure out here. This looks like it is an RPG-ish game. Hack and slash controls. Yeah, this one's kind of hard. I guess you just go with mob rule on this. 91% positive of 114 user reviews. It's really expensive. It doesn't have any full audio support for any language at all. Yeah, I don't know what else you could take from this. Bad level design. Would have expected more from this if only some levels weren't as frustrating, as boring as they were. Unbelievable. I would forgive the graphics if only the level design had some work put in it. The fact that, in my opinion, there's too much bad aspects ruins the whole experience. Blah 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 blah. Graphics, enemies. Yeah. And then everything else is not in English. So 12 versus 116 positive reviews. Well, the problem I think I run into here is I don't know what this game is. It doesn't really strike me as relevant to English-speaking world. world. If I was to look at this developer in Lionheart, it's just going to take me to DL Site's publisher page, and then DL Site is going to just push their mostly Japanese looking games, none of which look amazingly good. Now, the idea of playing as a anime magic girl in fighting does sound slightly interesting, although maybe you would be better just playing Nier Automata instead. This feels too much like an experimental project or a small game. Well, I guess I have to make a decision, and my decision is I'll just put it on the wish list. And this is a game that very well may go in circles. I may, next time I do a wish list cleanup, say, actually no, for $13.99 it doesn't deserve to be on the wish list. Or I'll just leave it on the wish list and then I'll never really buy it. Because I'll compare it to other games. The only other thing I could do is look at these other games and see that this one looks different, but looks pretty well polished and well received also. And then this one looks very well received also. But these also look like different kinds of games. This looks like a dungeon crawler. But I think that's kind of the point of this, is that they are different styles of it's unofficial is what it says. Alright, well, if it at the beginning here it says unofficial. If I pause this. So Shanghai Alice's the Toho project. This is an unofficial coverage of that. So inherently, I would need to play Shanghai Alice's Toho project first, and then become such a fan of that then I become I go looking for unofficial versions of this. Yeah, and this doesn't say Shanghai Alice either. Let's see, is there a let's see, Shanghai Alice. Could we potentially find Shanghai Alice as a developer? Not in English. So I'm diving so deep into Japanese games that I can't even see the sun from this point. Alright, this needs to be removed then, if it's just an unofficial clone of a game. I don't mind covering a clone, but I first have to understand the original game in the first place. This looks kind of like a Contra game in part, if you were just to put an anime girl instead of military people in Contra. Moving on. Next game we have to consider is Terrible Library. Well, it seems like what we're going to run into is a lot of Japanese-centric games, and these are very lesser-known Japanese games. Today. Well, that is kind of the state of video games in general. You have Western developers, mostly United States, North America developers. There's a few in Europe. And then you have Japanese developers, and maybe you'll get a few Korean games that will come to Steam also, and a bunch of Chinese games are coming to Steam, but they're not very good. There's some bad Russian games that come to Steam in large amounts. This game is 81% positive or 75% positive of 84 user reviews over its lifetime and came out March 28th, 2019. This is tagged sexual content, which may mean anything. Let's see. This to me looks like it is just a RPG Maker style game, or a cell phone game that has found a way to convert itself back into being a PC game. I guess you could do that. You could make a portrait RPG game and then a second screen portrait that shows up that you add back in. Yeah, it seems like the entirety of the game takes place on this screen. Let's look at the reviews, but I'm fairly certain this is a Manga Gamer style game, although it's not being published by Manga Gamer, where it's really selling on teasing the fact that it might have a few nude scenes in it. Let's see. Here you have a negative review. This game is an example developers need to tag the expected sexual content in the game. I didn't realize until I was a couple hours into what kind of kink it was involved with. Let's see. Slice of life RPG mostly means it really didn't take any time to make the actual gameplay any good. Saying it's an early access game. Saying it's a bit short. From what I'm seeing, it doesn't look like it's a very good game either. 21 negative reviews to 77 positive reviews is not that good either. There is kind of a Pokemon-esque visual appeal to this, since Pokemon is an RPG, and maybe that's what was in my head when I put this on the follow list. But I otherwise don't get it. But maybe I didn't get it either at that point too. If you just look at the reviews and don't dig any deeper, a lot of these games are crouching in at 75% positive, and you might accidentally think that that's a good game when really comparatively 75% out of 100% positive video game is a pretty bad game that you wouldn't want to play. This is leaving the follow list. Can we run into a game that is not a weird Japanese game? Maybe, maybe not. Next game we have to consider here is called Tessa's Ark. This came out July 13th, 2017. Unfortunately, it has no reviews, so I think this really just falls off the consideration list for being irrelevant. It's saying it's an RPG. From what I see, looks like it's a puzzle game. This is $4.99, and I'm not really willing to risk $5 on a game. Here's an update from January 3rd. Unfortunately, due to my own inadequacies in marketing and other areas of sales of this game, I've had to make some difficult decisions about the length and format of the game. It's probably turned into a free mobile game, but despite that fact, I still want to publish a port of that game at least. I unfortunately put a whole lot more time into the project that has ultimately been as unsuccessful as this one. That being said, I do plan on delivering a finished product. So apparently he wants in-game app purchases, and that hasn't happened. Let's see. I kind of like this art style. This is almost certainly an example of someone who has a creative art style, but an inability to sell a game or really develop a game. What we're seeing up here in the actual gameplay is really, really bad. This is the kind of person who would have done very well to just be an artist for a video game developer. Yeah, instead of trying to be an indie developer, indie publisher. I hate when it's like, don't get the wrong idea, this game isn't horrible. That's not really helpful information. Yeah, I don't need to dig too deep. Just on the surface level, this is not worth $5. It's a shame. I hope the artist gives up on making video games, takes this off Steam, and goes into just making art or becoming an artist for another game developer. Next game we have to consider is called Tetris Escape. Looks like all these images are loaded already, so I'm not going to reload the page. This came out August 10th, 2018. It has 3 user reviews. This looks like a mobile game. Not really sure why this is on the fall list. You place Tetris pieces, I guess, or you convert certain blocks into different Tetris pieces, tetraminos as they're called, to get from point A to point B and collect the 3 stars in each level. This is $1.24. It's basically just a mobile game. Even at that, though, it doesn't really have any relevancy, so I really don't see a reason to buy it. All 4 of the reviews are 100% positive, but that's still not good enough. Yeah, this is leaving the fall list. Next game to consider, and this is a special one, I guess I don't really have to consider. If this is not on my wish list, it should be. Unfortunately, it's not really a game I want. What happened here is I purchased the 7th Guest, and they made a remastered version that was basically a cell phone port that wasn't really as good as the previous version, and then they removed the original version off of Steam and only have this 25th anniversary edition, which is not as good. But then it gets even more confusing, because if you want the legacy edition, the original version, you can get it for free once you purchase the 25th version. So I'm in a quagmire. I either own this or own this and this, and was just automatically upgraded, or I only own this and don't own this, and really the 7th Guest is not a good enough game that you would want to play, purchase twice. This says it came out in 2019, but 7th Guest came out like in the 80s as a full motion video horror game. It's not terrible, and it has some history behind it, certainly, but yeah, it's not particularly great game. I've already covered it on my channel. That being said, I guess I put this on the wish list, or yeah, I guess that's what I do. You can see it's not even 60% positive because people hate this 25th anniversary edition, because it just kind of changed things that really shouldn't have been changed, and doesn't really improve the graphics very much. Like these elements, without a real remaster, without a complete remake, you couldn't make the 7th Guest good. And frankly, if you were going to do anything there, you probably shouldn't remaster it. You should reboot it. Right now, there is a fan-made 3rd game in this series. The sequel to this is called The 11th Hour, and there's a fan-made game that is being developed and might even be out as of this airing, called The 13th Doll, and that probably is the best way to go with it. I don't think Trilobite Games, who I think actually developed this game, still really exists, and I don't think Mojo Touch is really much of an actual game developer. Moving on. So now we have the first game starting THE space, and so this is a weird system that they're using. because in at least the Dewey Decimal System, this would be Abby, and then Abby Director's Cut, comma the, or at least the file list would have cross-reference links where it was both at the A's and the T's, but that's not how it goes here. So I'm thinking we'll probably stop after we hit THE space games and leave the rest for the next recording, because I imagine this is going to be super long. The Abby Director's Cut is a point-and-click adventure game. Apparently came out November 18th, 2018. I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventure games. I like the animation style here. This might be pretty short. This looks nicely animated, though. It's not going into a lot of different areas, but that makes sense if it's all taking place during an abbey, in an abbey. $11.99 is really expensive. Full English and Spanish Spain. Most people mislabel this, I think, and they mean Spanish Latin America, not Spanish Spain. Not that I think there's too much difference. I think someone from Spain could probably understand it pretty well. Let's see. The thing to take from this would be the reviews. We've got one negative review, not in my language. Well, needs an update, does not let you finish chapter 1, does not show Anso Moss's cell door. Also, no dialogue option at a Ludus Grave Digger site to open the cell door. Game cannot progress. Alright, that sounds terrible. And then the positive reviews as they're loading. Meanwhile, if we're going to look at other point-and-click adventure style games, they're suggesting Life is Strange, which is not really a point-and-click adventure game, and Adventure Capitalist, which is in no way a point-and-click game, The Wolf Among Us, Telltale game, Batman: The Enemy Within. Not any real point-and-click games. I think this is a point-and-click game. This is like a post-Brexit racial profiling game. That's, I believe, what that is. I guess the only thing I could possibly do is look at this developer and this publisher, but I think this game really just falls out of relevancy. I'm trying to see some good reviews to see if there's maybe an excuse that I could keep this on the wish list, but I think it's not gonna work. Just started playing, 36 hours on it. This person made it to chapter 4, apparently. An update to a 2018 game of the same name. Very few graphical options, voice acting is solid, art style. So is there another game called The Abbey? Let's try that. Abbey. Here's something called The Abbey that is mixed. Alright, so this came out 2008 from Crimson Cow and Strategy First, and then this comes out by a different developer and a different publisher in 2008. Wait a minute. What is going on here? That seems odd. Let's see. Let's look at the negative reviews here. difficult sliding puzzles. They name the game files with non-Latin symbols, so the first puzzle to solve is to fix the file names if you have a non-EU code page. Same thing, files are messed up. Disappointing. Plot is kind of interesting and dialogue's okay, but painful interface and ridiculous puzzles make the game really bad. So I could see what they're trying to do here is they were trying to get away from bad reviews and re-release the game with slightly better graphics, it looks like. I guess what this really comes down to, though, is the Abbey regular version, the Abbey Director's Cut. Either way, they both failed to really catch anybody's attention, so they're not relevant. And as I said before, I've got plenty of other point-and-click adventure games. There's plenty of point-and-click adventure games on Steam, and while I do like this art style, they probably spent way too much money on it and didn't spend enough time making gameplay. Sometimes you see games that look this good and it's questionable whether they had a contract to make a movie or a cartoon series and that contract fell through, so then instead they just used it to make a video game. Moving on. Next game we have to consider is The Adventures of Mr. Fluffykins. 61% of 13 user reviews. I don't think I really need to look at the negative reviews here. $3.39. Unless these reviews that are negative have something to do with save breaking update here. Delete this game. Platforming is super awkward. 55 out of 100. Unfortunately, there's kind of a considerable large number of kid-friendly looking platforming games, Super Mario 64 style looking games that don't have enough polish in them to actually be good 3D platformers in general, you know. And I think this is just another example of a game like that. Where it's just not finished or polished enough, which is kind of a shame, but whatever, it's leaving the fall list. Next game we have to consider is The Art Thief by Jay Doherty. This is a VR game which is 100% positive of 13 user reviews from Google. It's not so much, I think, an actual game, though. It's an interactive narrative. They have you paint a piece of art, and then it gets stolen, and you watch the movie as it gets stolen. It's pretty much all to take from there. Unfortunately, all the VR things that Google published, not really relevant. Like, most people never heard about them. Google didn't really put any kind of advertisement or promotion into it. It's free if you want to check it out, but frankly for me, I can just remove it from the follow list. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is The Black Watchman. Now, the problem I think with this game is this is an augmented reality game where you have to go to real websites, companies, and deal with NPCs that are created at perhaps those were real websites and companies. It doesn't contain the game inside the actual game, and that's kind of asking for trouble and not really a game I think I can embrace, because it's too multiplayer, even though it's not multiplayer in a weird way. So even though this game is 90% positive, and has 455 reviews. It's very relevant. It's really just not something I think I could. It's just not something I think I could be a part of. Also, a lot of these augmented reality games are way playable at the beginning of their release and then almost impossible to play after that point. So they're calling this a permanent alternate reality game. You use real world as its game world. You're buying season 1, which gives you 25 in-game missions, 66 puzzles, 5 hidden missions, and season 2 is optional DLC. Yeah. And Allison Smith is the publisher, and they have some other games that are kind of in the same vein, and I don't think if they're augmented reality games I could play those either. So that's leaving the consideration list, the follow list. Next game we have is called the Blackout Club. Let's see. I think there's another game that's very similar to this. This came out October 3rd, 2018. It's rated very positively, but I think this is, well, it's still in early access, and it's multiplayer focused, so I just don't think this is a game I could ever cover. The idea here is they use their phone to scan people or their phone for light, but not both, and like the parents are crazy or something like that, and you're getting chased by parents. It looks kind of interesting as a game, but I'm not sure it actually works as a game. And there's somebody shooting a gun, which is a little unexpected. So there might be something here that actually turns into something more of a game, but it's still in early access, and it came out October 30th, so it's had its 6 months to potentially catch people's attention. And there's actually a pretty considerably large amount of games somewhat like this, where it's heavily focused around the idea of team-based multiplayer. The Friday the 13th game is a kind of a great example of that, where they had the license of Friday the 13th, and still they couldn't really turn that into a gameplay scenario that people could play either in a single player environment or in a multiplayer environment that had enough people willing to play along. So the Blackout Club is leaving the follow list. Next game we have to consider is the Caligula Effect Overdose, which is rated M for mature. Although not tagged with nudity or sexual content, this is 81% positive of 80 user reviews. This came out March 12, 2019. This is a example of a game that almost certainly was going to go to the wish list immediately. I just wanted to make sure it was rated positively. This is kind of a Persona-esque game, considering how the Persona series is not on Steam, and Atlas of Japan, who is the developer of Persona, doesn't want anybody to stream late game footage of Persona. A game like this potentially is something I might consider playing and covering. This falls under the JRPG style of game, but it also does its own unique thing, because this is not set in a fantasy medieval style world. Instead, it is set in people going into like a computer VR world, I believe. And this definitely has a unique art style in which everybody is wearing white, which white in Japanese is kind of the color of death, in the same way that black is the color of death for Western groups. So yeah, without getting into it any deeper than that, this is $49, and there's a whole bunch of DLC, although the only thing you might want are the costume sets, which this is an example of a Japanese publisher getting really cheap or greedy and selling different bits of costumes each for $2. So this is also a game that I definitely want to see on sale before I actually purchased it. And I would have to compare it to something like Final Fantasy as far as JRPGs, although it is telling a slightly different game, a slightly different style of game. With these reviews, and it just coming out March 12th, which is only a few months, or maybe 1 month after as of this recording, this looks good, so that can go to the wish list. Don't really need to talk in circles to justify it. We're running into a lot of Japanese games. A lot of them are getting removed, but some of them are staying too. Next we have a game to consider called The Captive's Plot of Demurge. I have no idea how you'd pronounce that. Demurge? Demur? Perhaps? Action adventure game with real-time combat. This looks fine, but not really polished, and there's probably a dozen other action adventure games of similar ilk as this. Not elk. Elks are animals. And this does kind of feel like a mobile game with its character creation, and it doesn't look very polished. This came out in October 11th of 2018, and it has no reviews, so clearly it's not a relevant game, so that can be removed. Let's move forward. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is called The Corridor on Behalf of the Dead. This came out August 30th, 2018. This looks like it's a horror asset flip game that maybe I thought it had some unique visuals or some unique art that was actually put in here, but it's now in retrospect pretty obvious that this is just a asset flip game. I don't see anything here that I haven't seen like hundreds of times before. And pretty much probably true with everybody. $14.99 is way too expensive also. Yeah, this can leave the fall list. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is called The Cradle of Ruin. It's a Japanese visual novel, although this art style looks like something from the 90s. That being said, it also just kind of looks like a RPG Maker game. Is this possibly a re-release of an older game? Maybe. It's 97% positive with 40 user reviews. So let's go down here and see if maybe this is a well-known visual novel that has some historical importance. It's $2.99. That's not asking a lot at all for a visual novel. This might also be a low-effort Chinese game, and that might be the reason for the price too. This game is made by Charon. The Japanese version is free to play. As a publisher, we only charged for the expense of the localization work. If you want to play the Japanese version for free, click here. That feels like a Japanese game company for sure. It's like, we don't care We want to treat the Japanese consumer as well, but screw any foreigner that can't speak Japanese. We'll charge them money. Alright, let's see what this says. For a general audience who may not be familiar with the developer Shorin, they've been known in the RPG maker community mostly for their horror games, usually involving yandere women. Yandere being women who are crazy and kill because they're obsessed with someone they love. I haven't found any of their products to be particularly mind-blowing, but that's pretty much a given because most of them are really short. The Crater of Ruin is a decent enough product, but also one with a large amount of flaws. Then this review goes on and on. 6 out of 10. People write really, really long reviews on Steam sometimes. Yep. I've seen enough here to see that this really is not something that needs to be on the wish list. Meanwhile, the other games that they have are one I've not heard of and one I've not heard of. So they don't have anything else really on Steam either. Let's move forward. Next game we have to consider is called The Crown of Leaves. It's rated very positively. 97% of 393 reviews came out November 26, 2018. This is tagged as a visual novel and a point-and-click adventure. Looks like this is one of those anthropomorphic animal games where you're playing with characters that are animals in humanoid shape, or possibly a furry game if there's any romance in it, or I don't know. I'm still not 100% in my mind straight as to what I would call a furry game and what I would call just an anthropomorphic animal game, or if there really is even a difference. If I was to hold it to the most stringent definition, I would say a game could only be a furry game if there were actually humans in furry suits at that point. And I don't think I've seen any game like that. Well, $4.99 for a point-and-click adventure or visual novel does not look too hard. May 31st they put out a post, "We are live and we are working." Maybe this is an unfinished game. It's English and Russian, which is a bit of a red flag. Is this a finished product? Let's look at the 11 negative reviews. There's only one chapter available in the game until I finished it. I imagine I was expected to experience a whole story when started the game, but no, it just ended just at the point where the plot thickened. Usually should have mentioned it in the title, like Crown of Leaves Chapter 1. So, first chapter still being mentioned on March 9th. So, this looks like an example of a game that's kind of just been in early access or selling the first chapter alone for way too long. So, this is an example of people like what they see, or perhaps there's a bunch of trolls reviewing it positively, but it's an unfinished product. It's had 6 months. It's technically in early access by my definition. This needs to leave the fall list. Next game we have to consider is called The Darkest Woods. This came out June 14th, 2018. It's 88% positive of 18 reviews. I think this probably is a little too crazy surreal imagery without any real gameplay in it. It's another point-and-click adventure game. It's $2.99. This is another horror game that I could really only play in October. It's clearly going to disturb some people. Let's see what the 2 negative reviews are. A lot of people seem to like the game, and if you do, that's awesome, but overall I have to say I don't like it. The best thing about the game is the artwork. The visuals rank high on the creepiness factor, but the riddles are weren't very challenging, and the gameplay was a little buggy for my taste. If you're a fan of jump scares, then by all means play this game. But if you're a fan of puzzlers, and the lack of challenge on the puzzles kind of killed it for me. I almost wish there was a middle ground ranking for a game. So on, ... Russian full English full audio's a bit of a red flag. $3 if this was on sale. I kind of know what I would be getting. I kind of know that this would be a low effort short game. I think the reasons why I would purchase this are for the weird visuals. I think you're going to get the weird visuals here. So, in a weird way, The Darkest Woods does make it to the wish list. And hopefully I would get it for like 59 cents. And not $2.99. Next game we have to consider is The Darkest Woods 2. So they made a sequel. Well, this is 81% positive. I think if I make the same decision, it makes the same outcome. Let's see. Unless the negative reviews say something different. I don't even think I really need to look at negative reviews, though. Yeah, I don't need to look at the reviews. It's the same decision. Again, hopefully I would buy this game at 69 cents or less, and I'm getting it for the weird visuals. If anything, I would say this probably did try to make it more of a game, but not very much. This is a low effort game at the very least, if not a very low effort game. And typically I do not cover very low effort games. Alright, next game is tag sexual content and nudity, so let's blur this for a second just to make sure none of the screenshots are not YouTube friendly. The thing there is, in Steam's growing pains of allowing uncensored content on their storefront, some people took it to mean that the screenshots on the storefront could be uncensored too. Let's see. This is a visual novel. It's 97% positive of 399 reviews. It seems to me like it is clearly a sex romance visual novel for $24.99, which is about the right price for a visual novel. It has full Japanese audio, which is what you would look for. It's very colorful and pretty in its anime girl art style. I don't think this lands as a bad one. Like, there's 414 positive reviews, there's 9 negative reviews. It'd be kind of silly to listen to the 3 negative reviews. Meanwhile, it's recommending Galgun Double Peace as a similar game. And anything else worth mention? Maybe Nurse Love Addiction as a similar visual novel game. Yeah, this one, the ditzy demons are in love with me. Seems like one of the visual novels that I'd like to own to support the industry. Perhaps not one of the visual novels that I could actually play on Steam. Well, I could play it on Steam. Maybe I couldn't play it on YouTube. Although, who knows? Frankly, a lot of these games are tagged with nudity, but they might only have 6 or 7 images, and that's something I could easily censor out, as long as it's not consistent and sudden, particularly with my new blurring ability that I've set up. Next game we have to consider here is the Elder Scrolls Legends, which is a free-to-play strategy card game. I believe this is coming to the Nintendo Switch pretty soon, or maybe as of the time this airs, it will be completely out. There was a bit of a thought that this might be a Hearthstone replacement type card game, but I don't think it really could. The main problem is that I kind of don't want to give Bethesda my business. Bethesda, by far, is one of the worst companies that you want to see succeed, and yet, because they have Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls series, they've been allowed to succeed for a lot longer than they should, when you consider, like, Bethesda's well known for suing a lot of people and hurting the video game industry in general because of that, hurting the VR industry in part. Their parent company ZeniMax suing Facebook over Oculus technology. Bethesda's the introducer of DLC cosmetics and horse armor. They haven't made a really great game in a long time. Fallout 4, not an amazing success. Fallout 76, a total failure. Just not really, like, people talk about how EA is the worst company and you shouldn't give EA their business. It's really easy not to give EA your business. It's a little bit harder to not give Bethesda your business, but you probably should. As for this card game specifically, there's nothing interesting by the looks of it. It does look different from Hearthstone. In the last 30 days, though, it's 66% positive, where it was 71% over its lifetime, so they're losing ground since March 31st, 2017. I'm probably far too late to jump into this game anyways. It clearly didn't have a great launch. There's in-app purchases to buy more cards, I'm sure. If I was going to go to anything, I'd probably go to Magic the Gathering Arena, not Magic Duels. There's several other collectible card games being recommended. Maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist Links would make some sense. We could look at the negative reviews, I suppose. 2,133 negative reviews to 5,413 positive reviews. There's a lot of people that are not liking it. Was fun until the last update. Now all you see is red, blue decks, full word, and charge cards. Good luck having fun with anything else then, and good luck enjoying the RNG of red, blue decks. I'm out. Maybe I'll come back if they fix the trash pile they just made. So that's your most recent review, or most helpful review. Worst balance ever. It's a waste of time and money to play your own deck. Copy and paste the red and blue aggro deck, then run quick macros is all you have to do. So basically you can just cheat to succeed, and you can't do anything fun with the game. Alright, this is leaving the fall list. Next game we have to consider is the Eternal Castle Brackets Remastered. Now the trick here is this game actually isn't a remaster of anything. Instead, this is a brand new game that came out January 5th, 2019, and it is making itself look like a CGA graphics style game, which always had this weird cyan and pink color style when you used it on a computer monitor. That being said, I hear CGA actually looked rather good if you used it on a TV. So there's just some weirdness there on the color profile. But now when you run it in any kind of old game with CGA graphics, it looks like this, and it's really weird looking. So this is labeled an adventure action retro game. 85% positive of 174 user reviews. It's $10 basically. I might be willing to give this a chance. Let's look at the negative reviews. Let's see. Here's the most helpful review. Love the art style and gameplay, but technically it's an absolute mess. Some areas are unplayable due to lower, inconsistent frame rate. It is retro low-res CGA game. Even settings in the options menus reset sometimes, and you wonder why control scheme is no different. Hope the issues will be addressed. Can't recommend now. So it seems like the game might be buggy. Beautiful game, beautiful sound, horrendous controls, lag, terrible typeface, controller kills it completely. Game consistently crashes. Complicated controls, floaty movement, bugs, and broken combat. Yep. Very disappointing. Yeah, it seems like maybe they couldn't make a good game. In comparison, you could play the 20th anniversary of Another World, which probably also has some floaty graph controls, but at least that is a bit of a remaster of an old game instead of just a new game being labeled like it's a remaster. It's really all this is doing, though, is taking that retro visual style and using it as an excuse to have bad graphics. Nobody intentionally wanted their games to look like this when they first came out. That was just the best graphics cards could literally do. Your computer literally might have burst into flames if the programmers had them try to show better graphics. So anytime I see the retro or pixel graphics as an element in games, it really just sounds like laziness. So yeah, this can leave the follow list. Let's see. Next game we have is called The Gallery, Episode 1, Call of the Starseed. Let's see what the next game is. The Gallery, Episode 2, Heart of Embrace. Alright, so let's do this backwards and look at Episode 2 and see if that's a finished product. If it is, then I'll put both of them on the follow list. Well, these are also VR games, so they really couldn't leave the follow list anyways. It's English Simplified Chinese, which is a red flag. That video's not loading. 86% positive. Let's look at the negative reviews. Episode 1 was much better. Play that instead. It's not fun. Controls not well implemented. Objectives are too often unclear. There's zero replayability. Forget about it. Too short for the price. Episode doesn't hold up to the standards of Episode 1. So it seems like people enjoyed Episode 1 and didn't enjoy Episode 2. As a VR looking game, this looks somewhat detailed, somewhat polished. It's not just an empty world or an asset flip game. This is 87% positive. I think I have to kind of hold it to a smaller standard, even though it's $29 for a VR game. So I'm going to leave this on the follow list, and then that means I'm going to leave the Episode 1 on the follow list also, because I might as well. Episode 1 is also only $19.99 instead of $26. That's really weird. Yeah, this looks like a real VR game, whereas so often now VR games don't look like games at all. They just look like shooting galleries, for a lack of a better term. This looks very much like the salesman from Resident Evil 4. But I don't need to make a decision here. This is, yeah, just leave this on the follow list. It's good enough. Alright. Next game we have to consider is called The Great Sea, which says it's based on a sci-fi short story by Philip K. Dick. Amazon Prime did a whole TV series of Philip K. Dick inspired stories, and I didn't like any of them. Some of the Philip K. Dick stories that were then transformed into movies worked pretty well, but books being transformed into movie are pretty consistently changed so much that it's not really the author of the book series that had much input. This looks really nicely animated. It's a sweeping 30-minute plus experience. It's 89% positive. They want $6 for it. It requires VR. Okay. Yeah. This looks like a game. It looks like something if I could play outside of VR for 30 minutes, I would play outside of VR for 30 minutes and cover. Although 30 minutes kind of makes it feel a lot more like it's a movie than an interactive experience. This just stays on the follow list. Next game we have to consider is The Great Story of a Mighty Hero Remastered. This has 3 reviews, came out June 5th, 2018. I don't see anything here special. So I probably thought this looked a little bit like the game Overlord, and that's why I put it on the follow list, just to see if it'd get more reviews and be more relevant. It's $3.99. It's not relevant, to say the least. So yeah. Meanwhile, you could play Torchlight and have a better experience than this. Overlord is a Pikmin style game, probably best labeled as a Pikmin clone, and I'd like to see more Pikmin clones on PC. This is leaving now. Next game to consider we have is called the Horologist's Legacy. I don't know how you'd pronounce that word. Came out October 24th, 2018, has 4 user reviews. Again, no relevancy. This looks like an asset flip horror game. And yeah, it seems like that's exactly what it is. For $19.99. That's not making it to the wish list. Let's see, we have The Jolly Gang's Misadventures in Africa. This is, I guess, a point-and-click adventure, but it's also written the title in Russian, which is a bit of a red flag. Let's see, $7. Let's see, 20 achievements. Wait a minute, it says it has 20 achievements. There's no achievements in this on Steam here. No achievements at all. So either it has in-game achievements, or they lost their achievements because they did something to irritate Valve. Yeah, I don't see anything relevancy here. This came out in 2011, November 2nd, 2011, and has only 3 user reviews. This is the epitome of not being a relevant game. Moving on. I don't think we really need to consider the Lab, which is Valve's VR experimental software to try out their controllers that were new at the time in VR. It's overwhelmingly positive. It's free. This stays on the follow list because I doubt I ever really will buy a VR headset. If I did, the Lab has a very good chance of being the first thing I ever install and run. So yeah, I'm just leaving it on the follow list to remind myself that it exists. But it's not looking like I'd ever spend the money to buy a VR headset. It's too expensive, and I have yet to see any great games. You see little things that make sense for about 30 minutes, but nothing that would justify spending several $100s for a VR headset. Next, we have a game here for consideration called The Last Crown Black and Rock. Is this out? This isn't out. It doesn't have a release date. It either was removed from Steam or has never been on Steam. So I don't know what to really take from that, but either way it leaves the fall list. There's nothing else you can really do. If this comes back on sale, I will probably catch it then. This probably is not a good enough point-and-click adventure game with what it looks like to even really make it to the fall list anyways. Next game for consideration was called The Last Train, which is tagged as an adventure RPG simulation. This came out October 11th, 2018, and it's like a post-zombie apocalypse game, I think. Well, not a zombie apocalypse. It's post-World War II game and trains. It has really no relevancy though. Like 6 user reviews, $9.99. And then there's a whole bunch of DLC here they're selling too, to add it up to another $7.95. Yep, The Last Train can leave the fall list. Next game we have to consider is The Light Keeps Us Safe. This came out October 11th, 2018. This is 81% positive of 54 user reviews. This looks like it's an early access game still though. So then the question would be, do I want to give this some more time? I don't think I really do, because I think this game is actually trying to port itself to Switch and other consoles and still really hasn't come out of early access on PC. And I'm seeing more and more of that happen, where the game itself never gets finished and yet it still ends up on consoles, when in the old days, in previous generations at least, if a game was approved for sale on consoles, it was out, no early access, it was a finished product. Yeah, I could look at the reviews here and maybe consider giving it more time, but it's just as easy to say take it off the fall list now. If it comes out of early access and it is really, really good and people start talking about it again, put it back on the fall list or put it on the wish list at that point. Let's see. Next game we have here is Lord of the Rings, the playing card game. The Lord of the Rings adventure card game, which I think this is also going to Switch. You can see here mixed reviews. There was a slight thought that maybe this would replace Hearthstone, but the problem there is I don't think the universe is as well known or diverse in the Lord of the Rings universe than the World of Warcraft universe that Hearthstone is based off of. So it would start to feel weird, I think, once people started adding entire species and entire groups that were not in any of the Tolkien books. And clearly people are not liking this game as it's in early access too. So yeah, this can leave the fall list. Next game we have to consider is called The Masked Mage, which looks like it's just kind of an indie platforming game. This game has no relevancy. I could see what I was trying to go for here is an old Nintendo NES looking style of game, but each of these screenshots shows at most one possible enemy on screen, or this fairy is actually not an enemy, and then none of the screenshots show any enemies. This trailer is just showing a person platforming and walking for the most part. He attacks one enemy. This seems really simplistic, which screams that it probably isn't that. Well, it's probably really simplistic. So, yeah. There's nothing special that I see about this. This can be removed. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is the Midnight Sanctuary. And this is kind of a special exception that I will put on the wish list because of its kind of unique art style. And there is another game made by the same developer with this same characters and art style too. And it's from Sony Music Entertainment. It's an odd thing that Sony Music Entertainment has started publishing some games instead of Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is the PlayStation company subsidiary. So there seems to be two different subsidiaries under Sony of Japan, which is the main company, that are fighting each other about who publishes video games. And this seems to be a slightly new thing in the last couple of years. But yeah, I'll put the Midnight Sanctuary on the wish list. I don't know if too many games are actually going to make it to the wish list otherwise, because we're kind of getting close to the end, or where we're going to break up. Next game we have here for consideration is called The Mysterious Ship. Came out February 18th, 2018. It has 2 user reviews. This looks like it is a mobile point-and-click adventure game. It doesn't look terrible, but it's not relevant. Again, $1.99, Japanese, Chinese, and English, all the languages supported, which is questionable. Yeah, I can't trust this. This is leaving. And let's see. Some of these pages want me to reload. I don't know why. Next game we have for consideration is The Occupation, which is 72% positive of 48 user reviews. Came out March 5th, 2019. So it hasn't been given 6 months. It's already over 20. It's from the publisher, the Humble Bundle. Occupation is a fixed-time investigative thriller set in Northwest England, Saturday 24th, 1987. So, when you die, does time start over? Is that what happens? This feels like it's a AA style game, maybe even a single A style game. $29.99 is asking a pretty high price. It's probably not the greatest game. The Sexy Brutale is another game where time starts over and you have to work throughout that. So that might be the idea. Here's the most helpful review. I wish I could give this game a positive review, but I can't. Other reviews go into a fair amount of depth about the technical issues, so I want to discuss them here. I personally ran into a single bug, other actors walking through gates that wipe floppy disks, causing a floppy disk in my inventory to wipe, which the developers had planned to fix. This was March 8th. Reason for my negative review is that the game tries very hard to tell a story, but the gameplay mechanics undermine the story at every turn. You play the role of an investigative reporter who, for unknown reason, has been assigned to investigate a bombing kinda at a local high-profile technology firm. For some reason, you start with no knowledge at all of what the firm does. Initial impressions that you are a PR firm advocating for the passage of the Union Act, but later revelations reveal that this is incorrect, I think. Alright, let's skip down. We don't need a full description. Let's see. Skip the next paragraph too. So it says, yeah, play Republic if you're looking for a stealth espionage game with a good story, even if the later chapters in that game are disappointing. It's much, much better game on almost every level. This game would have been much better if all story elements had been dropped, and if it had been presented as a straight puzzle game, for example, like the Talos Principle. The actual gameplay isn't all that bad, although my preference would be to allow the player to end each chapter with it when he or she chooses, with the times being tracked, perhaps with a leaderboard. I didn't play as the developers intended. I restarted each chapter over and over again to ensure I found all the information that there was to find, since there was no way to replay chapters after you completed them without restarting the entire game from the beginning. I think this is a legitimate way to play the game. That sounds like the way I would play it too. Yeah. This is a game that looks good, but is not getting enough positive reviews. Maybe if I give it some more time though, because it is patching things. I think I'm going to be a little bit generous here. I'm going to leave this on the fall list and see if it patches itself and turns into a better game. Maybe it will, but probably not. I imagine what will happen is instead very little will be changed in 6 months, and then it will just leave the fall list anyways. Next game we have to consider is the one we found, which has no reviews and came out October 30th, 2018. This looks like a horror asset flip game. Yeah, I don't think that there's anything else to really say here. Like, I can't possibly play a game that has no reviews, especially one that's selling for $20, so that's leaving. Let's see, next game we have to consider is called The Other Half, which is 87% positive with 40 user reviews. Came out November 2nd, 2018. Let's see. This looks like a top-down game. I'm not a huge fan of top-down games, but there might be something here. I'm a little surprised that it's as well reviewed as it is, because it really doesn't look like much of anything. $7.99. This was updated with custom control mapping, which is probably helpful. By the way, Agony was a bad game that sold on sex. Succubus is the next bad game selling itself on sex. Well, I don't know if it's bad or not. It hasn't come out yet. And there's a third game that came out, Lust for Darkness, that was a bit of a bad game that sold on sex. I don't know if it was really that bad too, so it's a whole series here. Let's see what the not recommendations are. 6 negative reviews. What's Silver Chains? I haven't heard of that one. It's not out yet. There's Bad Dream Fever. There's a couple Bad Dream games that I want to play. Darksiders 3 I want to play. Very different game than some of the others. Darksiders 1 Mastered Edition. Yeah, I don't know how you get Darksiders to Agony other than they both kind of have a little bit to do with hell. Let's see. Meh as a negative review. Do not recommend. There's some going for it. The combat goes from simple to tense, but unfortunately back to simple again once you realize the entire trick is well-timed dodging. Can be pretty creepy. The story tries really hard, but in the end it's short and the play is dull. The story is poisonously didactic. Not sure what that really means. Refunded. It is good enough for as a 2-hour game, especially as at sale. So this is apparently the first negative review. Not recommended if you are a male. Interesting. Ultimately, the game turns into a feminist sermon with some wish fulfillment fantasy phone. I don't even remember what game I'm looking at this point, looking at these negative reviews. What game are we considering here? The Other Half. Alright. Okay, well, visually, let's just ignore those negative reviews and let's just take this one step at a time. Visually, this game looks like a top-down game when it really shouldn't be. Visually, this looks like a game that takes place in a Unity asset flipped world where you can't even really see the assets because it's always top-down. It seems like you're fighting monsters in some stages of combat, very specific locations where enemies will attack you and you'll need to beat them. And you're going to a green tree sometimes, and that's making the world greener. Sometimes I don't see a lot here otherwise, though. Like, this really doesn't look like much of a game. So I think this can leave the follow list. Here, that's the Ferris wheel knocked down. And this is the only point where you don't have a top-down perspective, is this picture of the Ferris wheel. So, yeah, okay. That can leave a follow list. Let's see. Next game we're considering, The Piano. Alright, this is 61% positive of 18 reviews. Came out June 4th, 2018. This looks like it's probably a bit more of an asset flip game than a real game. It's $9.99, and yeah, at that level of review, it's not received well. I suppose we could go and see what the negative reviews are, as these images don't want to really load. I imagine what this is just you have to stealth or walk from point A to point B, and then you see hallucinations. Perhaps it's a horror game where you're not actually ever in any danger, and that might be part of the problem with it too. Let's see. This game is a bit rough in its current state. While some horror elements exist, the story seems interesting enough to get involved in the narrative. Glitches and awkward pauses kind of ruin it for me. This was June 4th, 2018. Graphics are about PS3 level quality. Audio seems alright. I think the game could be saved if the dev puts more time into it. Otherwise, it's a solid pass for $7.50. What is it selling for now? $9.99. The price has gone up, not down. Yep. It feels like this game is something that got started to be developed and then wasn't finished. Lost its funding really quickly. So yes, this can leave the follow list. A lot of these, like almost all the games are leaving. Yeah, I said that was going to happen. Next we have a game to consider called The Pint Infinity, and this looks like it is a multiplayer focused game. It doesn't look particularly bad as a first-person shooter style game. It's just, I'm not sure there's a single player experience here. I guess that's really what this would fall down to. 77% positive of 58 reviews. Came out October 26, 2018. It's still in early access, and frankly 77% positive is not high enough. I could focus. It actually has no multiplayer other than online co-op, I guess this is just an example of a game that I could give it 6 more months, but it's had 6 months. It's not coming out of early access, or I don't believe it is. This has roguelike elements, so I guess it's kind of like a first-person shooter Diablo style game, a dungeon crawler. There's something there that sounds like a good game, but it probably would need a AAA publisher or developer to make a game like that. Yeah, so this can leave the fall list. Let's see. Next game we have on Steam is called The Puppet of Tirsa Episode 1. Let's see if the next game is The Puppet of Tirsa Episode 2. No. So this game came out March 28th, 2018. It hasn't been given a full 6 months. Technically this is episodic, so it's early access as far as I'm concerned. This looks like a kind of spooky imagery point and click adventure because you've got these black filled in eyes. If that's not the intent, then whoever drew these really does not know how to draw eyes correctly. Yeah, I'm gonna give this 6 months or a year whenever I do the next fall list cleanup, and we'll see if this developer has any more than episode 1 to sell. $6.99. It's probably asking a lot for one episode, but we'll wait. Let's see. And at this point, I'm going to just guesstimate that we are at the midpoint of games starting with the letter T. We've been going 2 hours and 16 minutes, and I think this is a good point to stop. Now, that might mean in the next recording, to get through all the rest of the games that start with the letter T, we go for 3, maybe even 4 hours, or it might mean that it's only an hour and a half if this is past the midpoint. I really didn't estimate it very much because I could only go so far on Chrome tabs to the right because there's only so much screen space. The tabs are falling off in Chrome. They're tiny little buttons that are at the top, and once you click on the button that's over here, I still wasn't done with games starting with the letter T. But yeah, this is the point I think I want to stop. So as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos because that helps me with YouTube and tells them that my videos are worth watching. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. Also, when you subscribe on YouTube to any channel, you have to click the notification bell and get the pull down to make sure you get all the notifications you actually want. If you want to support my channel even further, there's a link down below to Patreon. That would be greatly appreciated. Or the whole reason we're doing all of this is to curate the wish list on Steam. So if you want to support me that way, you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.